Good morning, André. It's nice to see you here online on our channel, and I hope that it's our traditional communication, traditional discussion with some colleagues from different countries is continue. And today we have André Plessis from South Africa and from Port Elizabeth. But I am going to shortly introduce André. André Plessis is associate professor, or possible now is changed, André will say by himself, and also distinguished teacher, lectures mathematics, media, ICT, and educational taught modules to pre-service and in-service students. And his main passion is ICT integration in schools. It's information that I found online, obviously, as open access information. And currently, André works at the Faculty of Education, Nelson Mandela University. As far as I know, previously it was a little bit different name, Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University, and it's quite understandable because our life is changing continuously with a lot of changes, and it's a high-speed life in reality. And for example, when I checked the information, if I understood well, Port Elizabeth also is changed. I mean, name is changed, and I'm not going to pronounce because in Lithuanian we're saying Gqeberha, but
Gqeberha.
Yeah,
Gqeberha.
Yeah, but in Lithuanian, Gqeberha as a city in South Africa, in the Republic of South Africa, Eastern Cape Province. Okay, this is a short introduction just from my side, but please, André, you can add something from your side.
I've got nothing to add from my side. I think you've stated it very well and eloquently. I can just say that one more thing is I've also moved into the mentoring sphere, mentoring of student teachers, perceptions and experiences of mentor teachers, and when they visit schools for their school-based practicums, as well as mentors' experiences and perceptions about what mentoring entails. This is a very important aspect in our country because education-wise, things are always not so good as it should be.
Yeah, it's and please, because it's really interesting. Remember when we met in Šiauliai some years ago? Time is running really quite fast, and we have a lot of in common. For example, as far as I know, based on your CV, you also started as a teacher at school.
Correct.
And this is, for example, sorry, I'm not going to pronounce because the name of the school, but for example, teacher in Vault Primary from 1993 to 1994. And next it was Newton Park Primary School, possible.
Yes.
From 1994 to 1996. It's approximately, in my case, I generally finished my career as a teacher in 1997 when I started to work at Ministry of Education and Science of the Republic of Lithuania, and later on, PhD studies, university, and so on. And this is somehow in common.
Yes. Good to know that we have seen some things in common.
Yeah, at least in this from this side. And okay, can you shortly present or introduce education system in your country, in South Africa today? I do understand that it's really complex, and but anyway, it would be nice briefly to know.
Okay, so you want to, especially the schools or the universities, or both?
Just possible, maybe a general picture and then some
Okay.
some specificities.
Okay. So South Africa has been through quite a change since 1994 due to the first democratic elections that was held, and the African National Congress came into power, which is a predominantly anti-apartheid black political party, and they had to deal with a lot of imbalances and issues, and what actually still remains is that there's a lot of social stratification in our society and in our schools. So what is actually happening is that you have a very large undeveloped section, and I'm saying underdeveloped, I means housing wise, services wise, infrastructure wise, basic resources that are not available to the majority of the people in South Africa, and also to the schools. I mean, there are many schools who don't have the resources, and if I talk resources, I talk enough classrooms, proper classrooms, ICT resources. Some schools don't even have toilets. They are still using pit latrines, and so there's a huge divide between the haves and the have-nots, and then because of that, it also impacts on schooling. So we can basically say that the South African school types can be divided into private schools and state schools, and the state schools one can also categorize again into different categories. So let's start with the private schools. The private schools are highly functional. Let me say that I don't want to generalize. I would say, let's say 95% plus of the private schools, because there might be private schools that's not so functional as they should be. But in general, the perception out there is that the private schools are much more functional than state schools. That's the perception, all right? So the private schools are highly functional, excellently resourced, but very expensive to attend because you have to pay out of your pocket. Now, there's some schools in our surrounding areas, last time when I've heard, they were charging per year between 40 and 50,000 rands. If I quickly convert that to, let's say the euro is 20, it would be about
15, 16 maybe?
15 to 16,000 euros. No, can it be? Let's make it 60,000 divided by 23,000, 6,000 euros at 20 rand per euro. 6,000 times. Oh, my math is now leaving me with quickly the calculations. Let me do that so that we have what you call.
How much you said in your currency in rands?
Let's say 50,000, and then we can just divide that by 20. Divide that by 20 to get the rand. I think it's actually 17 rand, 18 rand to an euro at the moment. So divide it by 18, and then you'll get the euros. It's about 7,000. 7,000.
Quite expensive.
What do you get? About 6,000 euro? 3,000 euro. Yeah, 3,000 euro.
Yeah, 3.5, something like that.
Yeah. So, and some can even be more. I mean, there are more expensive ones all over the country. I think one's called Michael House, which is probably much more than what I've shared with you now. Then we get the state schools, where we can categorize them basically into three categories. Now, people might differ how I categorize them, but I will say we get the fee-paying schools and non-paying schools, right? So these are the two main categories. It's not private, but parents pay a fee, or there's another category where the parents don't pay a fee. Okay. Now, normally, if you are fee-paying school, you are in many instances seen as being more functional. It's not always the case, I cannot generalize, but because parents are paying fees, the more the parents are paying, that will also have an effect on the functionality of the school. And then normally fees-paying schools have better resources than schools where they are non-paying. In the non-paying, fee-paying schools, there are also different categories that I don't want to get into, certain quantiles that gets differently subsidized by the government. But in many instances, and again, I don't want to generalize, but it appears that many non-fee-paying schools are in some instances very dysfunctional and not performing as they should be. Now, there are various reasons for that. And I think we'll come to that a bit later. These schools are in many instances without resources for instance, textbooks. In many instances, they don't have enough textbooks, or the textbooks don't get delivered on time to their learners and to the schools, or there are not enough textbooks that are delivered. Where in many of the state schools, where the parents are paying fees, parents actually in some cases have to buy the textbooks themselves, or the school will try and make as many as possible available, and if there's not enough, the school will pay it for themselves if they have the resources. So you can see that there's quite a disparity in the system, and I would say that, I don't want to now thumbsuck, but let's say 85 to 90% of the schools are probably falling into the category as state schools who are non-fee paying schools, which lacks the basic resources. And we don't even want to talk about ICT, because in many that is a conversation for a day. This is virtually non-existent in most of the schools.
And André, just a question related to this. You said just divided, let's say, into two parts, like private schools and state schools. If you would compare quality of education, for example, just in general, can you shortly mention?
Yeah.
Because in some countries, for example, it's different situation. In some countries, for example, private sector, let's say more valued, let's say more prestigious, also including this aspect like quality of education. And in some countries, in opposite, for example, state schools, state education, it's more valued than private sector.
Well, I think many parents, if they have the choice, will probably send their children to a private school instead of a state school, even if the state school is a paying school, a fee-paying school or a non-fee-paying school. And I think there is more prestige linked to many of the private schools. I think probably many politicians do send their children also to private schools or to high-paying state schools. I don't think there are many, if any, that are sending their children to non-fee paying schools, because there is the perception that you're getting, if you go to a private school, you're getting the best. Now, I must say, the quality of education, what is quality? I mean, quality is another debate that we can have and talk about, because how do you measure quality? And I think the problem that we have in our country and probably in many other countries that follows the same system is that our quality is measured by the final exit exam in grade 12, right? The matric exam, your X exam. And at the end of that year, all the results are published in newspapers, and they make all these analysis, and then you have to ask yourself, okay, if school A has a pass rate of 100%, is that a better school than school B, who's got a pass rate of 75%, for example? So if you go back to the private school, Vincentas, the private schools write normally the UK, I think it's the Cambridge exam, and their pass rate overall is exceptional. I think overall it's quite close to 100% for all the schools, I think. I might be wrong, but I just as I remember now. So their pass rates are very high, and obviously you expect it if you have to pay. I mean, you should expect it if you pay a heck of a lot of money. So the learners must be well prepared, etc., etc. But then there's also the question about quality. To what an extent do the teachers actually teach well, and to what extent do they actually teach to the exams and to the tests, right? Because that's also a debate for another day. I mean, many teachers teach, this is, they make analysis of what has happened over the years, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And then
I'm going to go by the way, in Lithuania also, for example, this year, after June, because it was also final exams, state exams for our students after gymnasium, and results in some cases were not so good. And it was relatively, this is the continuous discussion, obviously, but also a lot of some challenges and some deep discussions what to do, why we have such a situation, etc., etc. And for example, also, at least you visited Lithuania, but you know that it's in comparison with South Africa, it's really a small country, but despite that, we have some geographically or based on location, school location, for example, in capital city, in Vilnius, or in other bigger cities, somehow schools like mainly better schools, etc., better education in comparison with some province or regional schools in region. In respect to this, can you shortly say about South Africa? Because South Africa is a big country, and do you have some, or do you feel some geographical differences, for example? Because in my imagination, I visited some schools. I have some, small, but anyway, I have some experience. I visited some schools in Durban and outside Durban, some in some province, primary schools and secondary schools. And personally, I have some imagination a little bit.
Actually, before I try to expand on that, I need to go back to your previous question about the quality, because I haven't finished there. And after the private schools, I said that you've got state schools in two categories. The one being fee-paying and non-fee-paying schools. Now, the fee-paying schools are also in general doing much better overall than the non-paying schools in the grade 12 final exam, just to state that. There are some non-paying schools that perform excellently with very good pass rates and good results, but this is not the norm, all right? So it actually shows that non-fee paying schools can have very good results if they are, I don't want to go into all the reasons, but maybe say managed by a great principal, the staff is on the ball and is really pulling their weight, the learners are motivated, etc., etc., because they come from the same poor backgrounds than those of non-paying fee schools that play a role. Now, getting back to your question about geography, it depends how you look at geography in the South African context. If you look in the South African school context, most towns, due to the result of apartheid and the racial discrimination that has happened over the years, most of the schools that let's be blunt, which non-white people attended, because the white people were the privileged. And so most schools, as well as most housing or where people try to make a living, were at the periphery of the town, so outside the town. So geographically, they were never included in the other schools pre-1994. So geographically, city-wise, there's a problem. Okay. So what's happening now is that a number of learners comes from the townships, these housing areas on the periphery, and are taxied in or busing in, or parents try to bring them into not some private schools, but mostly state schools, fee-paying state schools, because there's the belief that there's a better chance for the learners to be successful if they attend them. As I said, it's not, we cannot generalize, but that seems to be the feeling or the perception. But then there's also geographically further a separation, what we call the rural areas. So we've got the main cities, then we've got smaller towns, and in towns again, these schools and housing areas were again built on the periphery. All right. So what has happened in many instances now is post 1994, many of these schools within the town, which was before 1994 white schools, have now changed totally to becoming 50-50, or it's now full of learners coming from the township areas. So there has been a change there. And then what's also happened, I think, is now that some parents from these communities or schools are now also moving their learners or their children out of these schools into hostels or places in the cities where their children can attend school, because there's also the perception that will improve or is a better education maybe. And then you get even geographically another, which we call the rural areas, which is there are schools that are located maybe close by a very, very small town, or 30 or 40 or 50 kilometers from a town, and they're in the rural area, which means that they might not have electricity, they might not have internet connectivity, they might not have the number of teachers they required, because some teachers might not want to teach there because of the distances, there are various reasons, etc., etc. So yes, definitely we are geographically split it in two, well actually three: the center, right, then at the periphery, and then again the small towns, the center, the periphery, and then the rural areas, which is between cities, and yeah, so definitely a huge challenge, challenge.
Yeah, and we slowly started to speak about challenges, and it's somehow my next question, because it's obvious that educational system in different countries faces certain challenges. Doesn't matter Lithuania or United States or Japan or Brazil, for example. Recently I visited Brazil in frame of IST Symposium University, and we discussed with some colleagues also, etc. But for example, remember when we discussed during our meeting in Šiauliai, and you presented also the education system in your country, and some dates also somehow common dates in comparing Lithuania and South Africa. For example, you mentioned 1994. In Lithuania in 1994, we started to work on so-called general programs, for example, because it was shift from so-called syllabus to curricula, to general program, general curricula, after we restored independence in 1990. And we needed to change a lot, to change education system, etc. And as far as I know, in South Africa in 1996, so-called South African School Act was introduced, was accepted, yeah. And the main idea was to promote access to education, to promote quality and democratic governance in schooling system, etc., etc. But on the other hand, we, for example, reading at least now another statement that South Africa has one of the most unequal school system in the world.
Yes.
Can you comment on this?
Yes, it's the Gini coefficient that's been measured, and obviously as a result of that, that impacts heavily on education, because if you're poor, and I mean, it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, you have aspirations for your children, right? You want to send them to the best school or the best university that you can. I mean, that's a debate for another day, the quality of universities, right? University A is seen as better as University B, as C, as D. I mean, in your country, you may be experiencing the same kind of thing, but I don't know how many universities you have. I think we've got over 20 universities in South Africa, so, you know, they compared on a regular basis. So based on that, many learners are not able to get the quality of education that they want, what their parents probably want, and the Gini coefficient is obviously playing a role. I mean, even with state-paying schools, right? Some schools would charge per month 300. About 150 euros per month, okay, which is 3,000 rand, even more, 150 to 200 euros a month. So now parents also have to, even if you're in the middle class, or you in the between poor and middle class, you have to make a decision. Am I going to send my child to school A or to school B? Because, I mean, a difference of 50 or 100 euros per month is a lot of money for education. And in some countries, I don't know your country, I know, if I'm not mistaken, in Slovenia, education in primary schools are free. You don't pay for education, right? So in South Africa, all of a sudden, you have to fork out 150 euros per month. That is quite a bit of money to spend. So yes, the Gini coefficient is playing a role, but at the same time, one must also ask what has government done since 1994 until now to actually make real improvements at school level, all right? So I think you've mentioned we're going to speak about challenges, and I'd probably, I think the challenges will actually indicate also what the solutions and what needs to be done. Because if this is a challenge, then we know that we need to find a solution for that specific thing. So maybe it would be better if we explore that, and then I can come in and say, one can then link it to say, well, all these things link to the Gini coefficient, but then also if we see what we are spending percentage-wise from the budget on education, right, then one asks oneself, why is it not improving as it should be improving? I mean, just to give you an indication, in South Africa, over the last 3 years, if we look at learners passing, and I just want to see which subject that is that I have now here in front of me, just give me a sec, because I think it's quite interesting. Physics, science. If the data that I have here in front of me is correct, it says that in let me just get the date so that I'm not okay, 2017 60 or above in 21. They say, well, I think this has been done, I don't want to get the exact, but it's within the last 3 years or so, that 164,000 learners wrote the grade 12 final exam, of which 124,237 pass, which is a 75% pass rate. Now, I don't know in comparison to your country, you know, what is the pass rate in your final exam for science, right? So 24% has failed, right? But listen to this. Only 19.8, let's say 20%, has passed with higher than 60% average. Now, the following year, right, only 15% passed with a 60% or more average. And the same for the next year, right? Which means actually that this is not good. It means that 85% of the learners are passing with less than 60%. Now, I haven't got the statistics to tell you what is the bracket, because the pass rate and hold your chair is 33%. Okay.
Yeah.
So what is the the difference between 33 and 40? Yeah, what percentage got that? Between 40 and 49, between 50 and 59, right? And I think then you'll be shocked, because you'll probably see that in most instances it's going to be the most passes are between 33% and 50%.
Yeah, but
of all these learners.
Yeah,
which is shocking if you think about the future of a country.
Again, I returning back to this strong and possible negative expression, broken and unequal education perpetuating poverty and inequality. It's not obviously correct. And to continue on this, I found, for example, if I pronounce correctly, Shanila Mohammed, Executive Director of Amnesty International in South Africa. And some time ago, she said that I want to cite her expression, for South Africa to comply with both its own constitutional and international human rights obligations with respect to education, major change is needed urgently.
Yes.
Can you a little bit comment on this? What does it mean, major change?
Yes, well, obviously how I see it and how somebody else see it will differ. But from my perspective as, being at schools as a teacher, being at the university, visiting schools. In fact, after our meeting, I'm going to a school in a semi-rural area to go and visit a student. I have some sense of what is going on the ground, and the change we need, I think, is greater accountability. And from that side, I mean teachers being in classrooms teaching, right? For example, the Honorable Professor Jonathan Jansen, esteemed scholar and colleague in South Africa, is many publications and I think renowned worldwide. I think studied at Stanford University, also all over the world. He told a story recently when he was be part of our postgraduate certificate in education program, and he shared this story because one of the challenges. He said he was going to a school in a fee-paying school, and he arrived there, and he says all of a sudden he saw a cloud, and he came in, and a dust cloud, and he came in, and he asked what was happening there, and somebody said to him, no, the people thought you from the Department of Education, so they all ran to their classes. They were sitting outside in the sun. So I think this, although I cannot generalize, but it appears that, you know, that these things are happening. It appears that, and if you look at the statistics, that the real time some teachers are spending in their classrooms are not what they should be spending there because of various reasons. There's a lot of absenteeism. There's a lot of schools without teachers in vital subjects. There are teachers in schools who are not qualified to do what they are doing. There are teachers that don't have the passion for teaching anymore. In fact, at some schools I've heard that, you know, when it's payday, you won't see the teacher in the classroom. Now, I don't want to generalize again, but that appears to be, in some instances, to be quite an issue. I think, yeah, there are some school days where there are more teachers at the same school as other school days for various reasons, and I don't want to go into that because I don't have the stats now in front of me. Otherwise, I could have talked about that. So, teacher absenteeism, teacher qualifications, knowledge. These are part of the issues, but at the same time, Vincentas, you can be well qualified or overqualified, and you can still be not a good teacher. I mean, if you don't have the passion, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, that doesn't help, right? You can be a teacher that doesn't have the highest qualifications, but you can be excellent because you're passionate, you've got the experiences, and you can do actually a great job. So, you know, one must always view it in that way. So we've got a teacher issue, but then we also got, because of the Gini coefficient, a learner issue, because the learners come from poor families, right? Some live in shacks, in very small places that's not conducive for learning. I mean, I just think of myself. If I was in that situation, would I actually wanted to learn? Because I would say to myself, you know what, my parents are saying, you must learn because that's the future. So, well, what future? Look what I have. How am I going to get out of this? I don't have money to go to the best possible school. I don't have money to go to the university. Yes, I might get a bursary, but where do I study? There's not place for me here. You know, everybody is always noisy. So we've got that problem also with the learners. But then we also got in the schools a huge problem, which is security and safety. Because a lot of learners attacks and fights with one another and with the teachers and gets very aggressive into fights.
For example, by visiting when visiting your country, and as I mentioned, some schools, and also when reading information sources, different information sources, the most frequently mentioned challenges or situations, for example, are violence in schools, high dropout rates, late coming, truancy, etc.
Yes.
And for example, I remember during our visit in one secondary school in Durban, one person was arrested. He tried somehow to do something wrong, as I understood, and police came and then arrested. It was somehow
Yeah, it's frightening. There are some schools where teachers don't want to go to school because they get threatened by parents and learners. There's no protection, and if we can continue with the challenges, many of the schools are not always fenced. Okay. But the problem also, Vincentas, is that you put up a fence. You still need people to patrol, or the police to regularly patrol the area. Because if you want to get over any fence, you'll get over it. Doesn't matter how high it is, you'll get over it. So a lot of schools get burgled and the equipment gets stolen, or they have if they have copper piping for their plumbing, that gets stolen and gets sold on the black market for scrap metal. All right, so and that obviously then again have an impact on the schools' water, pollution facilities, etc., etc. So the challenges are also further with the curriculum. The curriculum is so packed, all right, that you need to be a very good teacher to actually say, hang on, which of these things happening in this term can I actually integrate so that I can get what you call it, what is the word? So that I can get to everything that I want to do, right? If you're just going to follow the departmental policy in the curriculum, week 1, this so many hours, and from the textbooks, you know, and the guides, so much and so much, you're going to struggle because there happen things, for example, absenteeism of teachers, you as there's a sports day at the school, or there is a public holiday, or whatever the case may be, and these nowadays days are cut, all right? So that is a challenge that teachers need to see. Okay, I don't have to do exactly as they say in the textbook and in the teacher's guide to the textbook, only this today, but I can actually do more, right? And how can I integrate it so that it becomes also maybe more interesting for the learners? So I think we've got that. And part of the curriculum is that because it's so packed, I mean, we've seen it now with COVID, that now huge backlogs in our learners' learning because many schools reverted to what we call a kind of a platoon rotational system, which meant that some learners will go on a Monday and then they will only go on a Wednesday and on a Friday, etc., and the others will on these days. So obviously a lot of time has been lost, all right? And the only thing to actually try and get back this time is to actually, what I said, one needs to now think carefully, how can you integrate these things in a manner? But the pressure on the teachers, I mean, all of a sudden you have to wear a mask at school, you have to sanitize your hands, all, etc., etc. I mean, psychologically on teachers and learners, that has been also a huge challenge in our country. I don't know in yours. So I think I am worried that education or being a teacher is not important anymore. Society, I fear, is not putting the same value on the teaching profession than years ago. And that is sorry. I mean, if you're a medical doctor, there is still, I think, in our country, there's esteem. You're important, right? You are vital. But that should also be actually part of being teachers and schools. Because without teachers and schools, you can't become a doctor. And we need to recapture that. We need to recapture that professionalism. And it's only going to happen if we all as teachers are maybe even more professional than we are right now, because there are teachers that are very professional, but there are these teachers who are also not professional. Some teachers coming intoxicated to schools, some teachers being not at school on a Monday because of being intoxicated, maybe. All right, these are things that happen, and I don't think these are things that well, it'll be interesting to hear whether these things are also happening in your country that I'm sharing right now. But we need to, the government needs also to show that teachers are important. They need to be paid better, but then also they need to be more accountable in the sense that inspectors need to visit schools to see what are the problems, and if there are problems, how can they help? You know, that kind of thing. And that, I think, is extremely lacking at the moment in our country. There are small things that can be done. Monitoring. If you don't monitor, I'm sorry, from my perspective, things are going backwards because who's looking at you, right? And it doesn't need to be monitoring in the sense to be punitive, but monitoring to see what are the issues so that you can be assisted.
Okay, André. And in Lithuania, for example, some years ago, it was accepted like a national idea to have teacher profession as the most prestigious. It was one of the national idea, maybe up to 2025 or 2026, we will see. But yeah, we are working on it. Okay, let's speak about something positive because a little bit negative connotation. Do you see some positive trends in South Africa education system in general? For example, just if we compare trend for after 1990, as we mentioned, a lot in common.
It's difficult to find positives really, because the pass rate is not really improving. It's not improving really in maths. It's not really improving in science. We see with the PISA testing. If we look at the results of the grade 8-9 cohort, it is shocking. I think we last or second last. And I've looked at some of these examples, and I said, wow, the problem, we all know the problem actually also lies not just in the final year of schooling, but from the start of schooling, because the foundation is not there, you've got a problem. So, are there positives? Well, what I can say, it is small pockets of excellence that has developed in some disadvantaged schools where principals have really started to do things in innovative manners, and the pass rates have increased significantly, right? That is positive. The question now is, what can be done to actually get the schools who are not performing to do the same or similar things as those poor schools who are performing? I think that so those schools who are performing, that is positive, despite their. Then a number of our students have a passion at the university to teach in disadvantaged schools and want to make a difference, which is I salute them for that. So I'm positive that at the university I can at least say, I don't want to speak about my colleagues, but myself, now when I go to school, I try and support my students when I see them the best and as optimal as possible, because I believe that can influence them also. So there are small things happening. There are engagements where we as a university are also part of some innovations and research in schools, which seems to be positive. But overall, the picture is bleak. The picture is bleak because we need leadership where things are which are focusing on the important things. For example, why are there still learners who have to use spit latrines so many years after the democratic elections? Where are all these fundings going? So unfortunately, Vincentas, there are a few positives, but I feel for the schools and I feel for the teachers, because I don't think they get the support from government that they should be getting.
Okay, but for example, is it possible to say that education is like a priority for your government, for your politicians at state level, or it's not the case?
Look, well, that I don't know. I mean, if it's a priority, then one should actually see that these main things are getting fixed, shouldn't we? I mean, talk is cheap. Cannot buy whiskey, all right, or beer. So if politicians actually really care, they should put their money where their mouths are, and they should force through positive changes, things that the communities can really see that is bringing about positive things. And I don't see it happening overall. Okay, there are a few provinces that perform well, but again, if you say a school has a pass rate of 100%, right, and another school has got a pass rate of 100%, it doesn't mean that the passes have been equally good, right? The passes from the one school in maths and science could be between 33 and 55%. The other schools could have a 100% pass rate, but there is the majority between 50 and 60%, right? So you cannot just look at pass rate, and that's what's happening in our country. We're looking at this province got so many matrics that wrote the final year exam, and this percentage has passed. You need to look at what is the quality of the passes and I've shown you just now earlier. I shared with you about the science pass rate 60 and above. Okay, now if you even go deeper, what is that going to reveal? And I don't think these things get actually published because the statistics will tell a very bad story. So yes, is there hope? There's always hope. There's always hope. But at the moment, I think many teachers feel that they've been left behind. Children that they've been left behind, and that's what I get from the system. The dropout rate is extremely high. Do you know that if the learners who integrate one in South Africa all have to stay at school until grade 12 and write the exam, I think we will not have enough schools at the moment, because the government knows there's a certain percentage of learners who are going to drop out. They know that, okay, with stats. So if the schools have to be improved and these learners stay in, we will have to build so many more schools, and I don't think there's money for that. Okay, so we sit with the crisis, and there's no other way. There's hope. There are pockets of excellence, but in general, we sit with the crisis. I would not like to be if you had to choose a country, let's say, with an overall 75% pass rate for grade 12, and in a country with a 98% pass rate, right? And then you start looking at the passes, you see the quality of the passes, most of them between 33% and 50%. What are you going to say? So we sit with the crisis. We cannot just look at a figure. And what is the general pass rate in Lithuania at the final year?
Okay, but today we are speaking about South Africa.
Okay.
Okay, but let's continue on positive note. How do you see the future education in South Africa, at least in near perspective?
Look, I think what is going to happen as a result of COVID is that more and more digital schools are going to open. And private schools. I mean, there is a number of online schools already as a result of COVID-19. And if you can afford it, and some schools, private online schools, try to make it very, affordable for you to join them, which is then actually a form of homeschooling because you're at home all the time. It's just that somebody is teaching you, not at a real school. So I am thinking that this is to become something that is going to grow more. There are also a private school group called Curro, C-U-R-R-O. I'm not promoting them, but they're also private. And they are trying to make it extremely affordable, right, for learners. And I believe that they have a very demanding system in place to ensure that the teachers do everything that they should be doing. There are lots of checkings and things. So that is something that is happening. I also see that there might be more online platforms, maybe free schooling online platforms where companies pull money together for these systems, and obviously paying people to run the online systems. So that more learners can get access to quality of education or supplementary education. For example, if you don't know something about the topic of maths today, you can go onto that system, click on that, and there will be somebody explaining that to you. In fact, we are planning and hoping to do something like that from my side here at the university, where if we get enough funding, that we want to create a Moodle platform for grade 4 to, let's say, grade 7, 8, because that is where the main problem is with mathematics in our country, the foundation, building blocks, and see if we can offer something then to schools for free, where per grade in maths and science for learners to use. So I think these are the positive things that's going to happen. Tablets, the government has started to sponsor or provide teachers with laptops and some school learners with tablets. The issue is that many teachers don't want to use these devices because of various reasons in some instances. In many instances, these tablets are not used by learners and stored in a strong room, because teachers don't feel comfortable using these devices in the classroom. So, but it must come. It's going to happen, whether we like it or not, okay? And so our innovative project that's starting soon, a research project also comparing teaching mathematics in a traditional way of certain topics and teaching the same mathematics using Gqeberha and learners with tablets, those can see whether it makes a difference or not. So yes, I have hope. There are possibilities and positives. The only thing is to get the people on board to actually go with you with these innovational things.
Yeah. You mentioned mathematics, and mathematics is really problematic in not only in your country but also in Lithuania and in other countries too. I don't know why. For example, currently our team, the national team, is working on Erasmus Plus project, Bridge to Teach. The idea is to create bridging courses for students, generally for first year university students who recently entered university. And for example, next month, quite soon, in beginning of September, I'm going to Bratislava, Slovakia. We will have our final conference, project conference, and also meeting. But the situation in at least in our project partner countries like Italy, like Austria, like Slovakia, Czech Republic, a lot of problems with mathematics or with quality of math education in general. But this is again so deep and dark discussion, maybe for future. And somehow we turn to another block of our questions or issues, interesting issues. It means science education and ICT education, because somehow it's your area of interest. And in any way you represent this area of this field of science education and ICT education. And it would be interesting to know more about the state of the art related to science education and ICT education, just briefly. Can you shortly comment?
Well, I must say I'm excited at our university. We lost a number of our experienced staff members in science and in maths, beg your pardon, over the last few years due to retirement. So this created quite a gap, because I mean some of them has been here for years, and despite them being old in inverted commas, they used ICT and embraced the resources, so that wasn't a problem at all. So they had a lot of experience when they left. I was very, very happy to see that the appointment of one of our new lecturers in the science department, how she is also embracing ICT, and even now, during us still being off campus, not having students in classes, she by some way found it a way to actually get the students to classes, and she's using the data projector as well as cameras to show experiments. For example, if she doesn't have all the equipment so that each learner can have or student can have it, she has the camera zoomed in, then everybody can see it, and she's doing experiments with them. She's going beyond what just the curriculum asks for in the intermediate phase. So it's Miss Simani, Ayanda Simani, if I'm not mistaken, and she has really been a blessing. The way that she use ICT, teach science and maths, that is wonderful, and I think that is vital, because we need to teach the way that we want our students also to model when they teach. Show them different ways of how to. We cannot just lecture our students. We need to show them actually how things can be done in different ways. And I am happy to say that Ayanda is really doing here a great job. There are also others but I know, because I've seen the photos that she shared on WhatsApp with us, engagement with the students, and so that about that. So ICT in general in South Africa and science, wow, I don't know, Vincentas, because a lot of schools, as I've said, especially the poorer of the poor schools who doesn't get who is state subsidized and doesn't get money from parent income for school fees, they are struggling to integrate ICT into science, and in many instances the computer rooms are not used at all. Some schools have, but they're not used or very seldom used. They're not maintained because computers also need maintenance, on and then they get out of use. So we sit with a problem also in the classrooms. Maybe you guys are sitting with the same problem in Lithuania, is that when ICT is used, then it is basically replacing the blackboard. So it is basically using as just as a presentation tool, and If you recall, in 2016, I've published in a journal called the Journal of Baltic Science Education. Do you know that journal? In any case, I published in that journal. And I published a matrix there based on which I adapted based on some other people's argumentation. A matrix consisting of 4 quadrants with one square in the middle and a square or rectangle in each of the others. And if you look at where I said that people are mostly using computers, in the one quadrant, which many schools have been doing in the past and still doing, is just basically computer literacy, if the learners go to that, right? The other is using ICT as a presentation tool, very behavioristic, right? Very little interaction between the learners and the students. And then the third quadrant, your cognitive tools, using ITV as a constructivist cognitive tool where learners create things and are active, busy using the device and is discussing things. And then the fourth quadrant, using ICT in a innovative way, meaning you use existing tools in different ways that it is intended for originally. So for example, if you use PowerPoint, instead of just making a PowerPoint for the learners can create a PowerPoint and present their PowerPoint to the class, or the learners can create a digital story in PowerPoint about a science topic or any topic, and the learners watch it. Then it becomes a very innovative tool. And then in the middle, the elective aspect, where you take, when you teach, whenever, something from both, something from the presentational tool, sometimes from the representational tool, sometimes from the innovative part. And that's where you want to go to. But most teachers start in that quadrant on the bottom left, presentational tool, and they stay with that, and there's no movement. So I think where it is used in schools, it's probably highly likely that is the predominant usage.
And okay, but during COVID, really COVID somehow facilitated and accelerated, I would say, the use of ICT
Absolutely.
In general, but and also teaching online and learning online. From one side, it was a good possibility to continue educational process, and on the other side, it raises a lot of difficulties, a lot of challenges.
Yes.
For users, not only for teachers, for everybody, for users, for teachers, for learners. And for example, I feel just as you mentioned, like editor of some journals, and not only as researcher, a lot of papers worldwide, mainly connected with COVID. It's in one or another way. And for example, our team also performed some comparative studies recently with bachelor students, for example, university students, and with second cycle students, or we call it master students. And there are obviously some advantages, some clear advantages, and on the other hand, some serious disadvantages in online teaching. But in addition, we are not, let's say, when we're speaking about online or distance education in so-called, I would say, classical mode, because it's not really yes. so new. But when we're speaking in COVID context, this is like emergency mode, like emergent mode, in not common situation, not common conditions, etc. Yes. We need to use different platforms and to learn at the same time, not just to use properly, but to learn at the same time how to use. What is your experience or South Africa experience in this case?
Well, I can just briefly talk about schools, and then I'll talk about the university experience. I think the majority of school teachers and learners were not ready for what is going to happen when COVID So to get back, many of the teachers were not prepared, in a sense that they have not used digital devices for educational purposes before, I think. Also data. I mean, now you have to get much more data and you have to buy it out of your own pocket. So that has been a challenge. It's the same for learners. I mean, not all learners have devices. Especially if you're living in the poorest of the poor areas, you're not going to have a device. One parent might have a device, and now you have to use that device. Also data. I mean, some areas where learners live, data is not available. In many of the rural areas that I've referred to previously, you won't find any data connectivity. These were huge challenges, and then now teachers also had to learn how to do recordings in such a way that they can send it to learners, but they must also send it to learners so that the file is not too big. The file size, WhatsApp limits you to, I think, 20 megabyte of sending a file or a video. How do you use PowerPoint? How do you record on your computer? Some only send text messages or just send voice messages via WhatsApp. So there were all different styles that were developed. Some were well received, some were not so well received. It all depends on a number of things. Some of the fee-paying schools started to use MS Teams and Moodle as platforms, which was well received by many learners and parents. And at university, that was, I think, that was for many lecturers a real challenge, because not many has used Moodle, MS Teams or any of these platforms before. So there was a very quick and steep learning curve. And again, I would say that most reacted with the emergency teaching format, which means that we'll be teaching, you could see my face, I'll be using PowerPoint or electronic whiteboard, and that's it. And then you will still be writing now maybe an online test or two and do an assignment instead of writing two tests in a traditional sit-down venue and doing an assignment. So many, reverted to that kind of mode. But there are some of us that has tried to be innovative, where we have used this mode and then included a blended format. So in other words, although you're not in my classroom and you see me teaching, it is still traditional, but then I added to that a blended format, which are additional activities online that needs to be completed while you're not in class. Forums, reflections, assignments are now uploaded, and instead of only maybe having two main tests and an exam for a semester, one have for every unit or every second unit you have an online test, and then a few larger tests also, to give the students more opportunities to learn and more opportunities to grow as a result of this. So yeah, I think it was a huge challenge for us, especially the first 6 months, because you had to convert everything that you had into PDF, upload it, make changes, your videos, post your videos online for your students, all things that you haven't really done before. But it has been a good experience, but also a bad experience. I've told you now about the innovation and the positive aspect. The negative aspect has been some of our students' reaction. Now, what I've noticed, and you guys, if you've used it also, MS Teams or whatever kind of tool when you engage with your students is that, let's say you've got a class group of 100 students. Now it shows that 95 of them are logged on, right? But that doesn't mean that they are actually the 95 are all there. It might be that only 50 are there, because you just ask a question, Vincentas, can you maybe just tell us more about this? And Vincentas is silent. And Pietro, what can you tell me? And it is silent. And then when you leave the lecture and you say, goodbye class, see you next time, then another 40 will stay on for another 10 minutes, which means that they are not leaving the room, which is quite a good indication that they have not been attending your class. So these are some of the issues, and so they're losing out on that, and then they might watch the video which you make available to them afterwards. Okay, there are a number of them that do, but there's also a number of them that don't, and then come and ask you questions about, what do I do for this assignment? I thought this and this. You say to them, have you been in class? This session explained that it's there on the video also. So then another issue that I've experienced is that how can I put it? That the interaction is missing, especially if you've got large classes. The interaction is missing, and I cannot really. I tried to show you how you could teach this in class in a constructivist manner, or using learners' individual thinking, but I actually want my students to be in the classroom so that when I teach it in context, and that I struggle to do online. I want them in groups to engage when I do pair share. I want them to go through the whole process and not just as I try to explain it. And then lastly, I think as a result of many students not attending and not watching the videos, we are sending in qualified teachers into the system with huge gaps in their knowledge. And that is what I think any online learning can actually do. Although it is received positively, and although it offers a lot of possibilities, it also offers a lot of possibilities for students to not do certain things, to not attend, and to lose out on a lot of things. Yeah. Because to conclude, when you teach, you don't just teach everything which is in that unit for that module. You add a lot of things that you share with them, which is not in the book or is not on the text that you give them, and that's where they lose out.
But it's obviously it's different situation and experience, having in mind different levels of education. For example, if we would talk about secondary school level, for example, approximately, this week it's we are starting our new academic year from 1st of September. And for example, next semester, personally, I'm continuing to work online with my master students, and also in Lviv, our university will work generally online, maybe with some exceptions to bachelor students. I want to say that okay, we are speaking a lot about technology, but technology is not the primary thing. Sometimes my impression is that if you are playing with different platforms, different technological tools, etc., oh, it's good, it's okay, you are on the top. But my understanding is different. It's not the indicator of effectiveness, for example, quality. If you're using different, if you like interplay usage, different platform, different tools, different apps, etc., etc. Somehow people just concentrating, teachers just concentrating on technology, but not on real teaching. What do you think?
Yeah, well, obviously, I think when you use technology, you must ask yourself first of all, what is the purpose of using it? Am I using it just for using the technology? Because you can use it and it can have not a good effect on the learning because it's not the correct video that you've selected, or you haven't watched the whole video before you played it to the learners, or you haven't prepared well enough using this. So I think if I understand you correctly, we should not necessarily always just embrace technology for the sake of embracing it. But you can teach very effectively without technology. Now I must be careful because the blackboard and the whiteboard is also technology, but it's not digital technology. Maybe we should say digital technology. So you can teach excellently without digital technology. I mean, there are some professors and some teachers that teach just by talking, right? Without learning interaction. And you are wowed when you sit in their class because it's amazing the way in that they're doing it. So I think we should not just, as I say, embrace technology for the sake of technology, and ask ourselves when we use it always, what is its purpose, right? And how can I actually get my learners involved to do something, to create something innovatively, which they can share with the pupils in the classroom to learn from, right? Those are the shifts that we need to make. I had a very positive experience a few years ago in a philosophical module of education, where my students in groups made cell films, and I gave them some guidelines and and they had to cover what the 5 or 6 units were trying to get over to them in innovative ways. And I'm telling you, I can share the link with you. I was amazed what students can do if you give them the opportunity. And so I am all for that. If we use ICT, I would like learners to create things that other learners can view and use instead of me, and then critiquing it maybe afterwards. You know, what is good, what changes can be made so that they grow, because that is what they're going to do one day. They are going to create things. That maybe is something that will make me positive. If we go back, when you ask me what is positive in South African education system, that will be a positive, very positive thing if we can let learners start to use these tools to create content, research content, how they explain things in maths or science, yeah. This is what makes me exciting if we can go that route.
Okay, thank you, André. It's really interesting, but you know, this is somehow a little bit stereotypical point of view. For example, if you do not use some technology, say digital technology, you are not modern. You are so traditional. And in opposite, vice versa. If you use some technology, some digital technology, different technology, yes, you are innovative, you are modern enough, but from my understanding, it's not correct position.
What do you mean?
Because what does it mean, innovative and modern? If you use, for example, let's say Microsoft Teams or WebEx or Zoom, is it already modern? As you said, somebody can, for example, without any technology, any digital technology, can teach very efficiently, right? Mm-hmm. And André, possible the last question from this part, because, for example, taking part in IST symposium at the end of July, we discussed shortly with colleagues in Brazil about STEM education. And they were surprised that majority of them said that it's not common for us, or at least it's not common in Brazil. I saw okay, it doesn't matter, but possible one poster or two posters somehow related to STEM education in Brazil. Can you shortly say something about STEM education in South Africa? For example, because I remember I visited maybe twice in Durban one center which is deeply involved in like a STEM education, for example, Project Science to Go. It was so interesting, and with some mobile laboratories, labs, they are going through some region, visiting schools, students, learners, and performing different tasks.
I don't think STEM is currently big in South Africa. Probably due to resource issues, but my knowledge about STEM and what's really happening in that area is limited. I do see some expos here in our town in Gqeberha, Port Elizabeth. There's a yearly science expo, which I assume is trying to use STEM principles, but in general, I don't think STEM is really big as I perceive it in South Africa. There's a push for STEM education, and there are some of these buses that travel and show to learners what science is all about and what can be done, and make learners excited about it. But I don't think it has the same focus as it should have at all here in South Africa.
For example, in Lithuania, some years ago, we started like a national, I would say like a national project, and 10 regional STEAM centers were launched. And for example, one of them is located in structure of our academy, currently Šiauliai Academy of Vilnius University, regional STEAM center. And if I know well, currently center has possible 6 labs, and students from the districts, from the region can visit, teachers obviously with students practicing in labs, etc., etc. It's quite I think quite useful and quite important, but it's like let's say outside schools. But obviously in schools, talking about curricula or programs or general programs, also STEM is reflected, and etc. But it's obviously we are not going into some details. Okay, and tradition. Okay, I don't like this term tradition or traditionally, but okay, let's talk about teacher education, because it's, I think this is backbone in any discussion, or when we're talking about education, teacher education. And the main issue is currently it's quite popular to speak about so-called new generation of teachers. I found many such expressions in information sources online, etc., and also in different discussions, that teacher must be competent, highly competent, etc. Teacher as a researcher, teacher ability to plan, organize, to conduct applied research, identify learning barriers, evaluate, etc., etc. A lot of functions, etc.
Jargon, yes.
Yeah. What, in your opinion, what does it mean with new generation of teachers?
Yeah, that's a good question. New generation. I mean, what is a generation and why are they new? I think what my understanding of this would be that besides what you've mentioned, what they say about the new generation is that it's a generation which will have to accept different modes of learning, using different technologies for learning, and a generation that is maybe more compassionate and try to assist to remove the eradication of the injustices and inequalities of the past, especially in the South African context. Teachers who can practice a humanizing pedagogy, which place the learner at the center, right? And the learner's needs are at the center, so that learning can be improved, because that is currently our biggest challenge, the quality of learning, because it's also impacted by the Gini coefficient again, in the sense that poverty links to parents not being able to feed their children properly. Many children go to the school or coming in the schools in the morning without a meal. So some schools have got feeding schemes running. At least the learners will get one meal a day. And those things impact, right? So this new generation teachers must be ready to jump in and to assist with the soup kitchens, with the food kitchens. They need to be able to be multifaceted, right? And be more, maybe more compassionate than many of us are. Many of us as the old guard, and I refer to myself as the old guard, are maybe sometimes too set in some certain ways, right? Maybe adapt not as easy to new ways as others. So yes, and then these new generations teachers will also have to accept is it the 3 C's or the 4 C's of creativity, collaboration, and critical thinking. A new generation, thinking differently, being differently prepared to guide the learners into a future which is full of challenges, specifically the climate challenges, food challenges, the growth of the human population, etc., etc. These new generation teachers will have to make an impact on the learners so that they can sustain a better future for their children and learners one day.
Okay, but let's continue, because my another question is about prestige of teaching profession in your country, because we know very well that in different countries, in different regions, situation is really different. For example, I'm not going into details, but if we can mention, for example, South Korea, Finland, Taiwan. I visited Taiwan, for example, many times, and some schools, etc. And speaking about European countries, your favorite country is Slovenia, as I understand. Okay, or Lithuania, its situation is somehow different. It would be nice to know from you your position in South Africa.
Well, I think I've alluded to that before or earlier in our discussion. I think the prestige that should be is not there, and in many instances, I think it is the actions of teachers that needs to be looked at. unprofessionalism by many of them in functional schools and in non-functional schools, in fee-paying schools and non-fee-paying schools. We cannot just say that unprofessionalism is just related to one type of school, if you want to categorize that. And in fact, I mean, there are in some instances where you read in the papers where there are sexual relationships between teachers and learners, which is unacceptable. It goes even further. I don't want to go into specifics, but you know, there are accusations sometimes of raping. There are violence from teachers onto learners and learners onto teachers. There's society or parents that is disrespectful to teachers and teachers to them. And all of these things play a role in the end. So although it should be seen as a prestige profession, because of all the things that happen, you know, striking actions of certain workers' unions, and yeah, all these things I think play a role in how society see the profession. And I cannot say at the moment that it actually reflects that, wow, if that 10, 15, 20 years ago, when I was starting as a teacher, I felt that there were more, how do I say, you were regarded as something more in society. And I've taught from poor schools to middle class school to middle class rich schools. And I just saw that it's going down. You're not, like in the beginning I felt really important, that I'm valued. But it seemed to be changing over the years, that you're just another worker, just another person that's, you know, doing your job. So I think it's not, we don't have that that prestige, and this is really something that has to be recaptured.
Does it mean that society in general do not value teachers?
Well, I don't know. You know, I don't want to generalize, but teachers are not put on the pedestal as it would have been 10, 15, 20 years ago. We see the same thing with religion. All right. If I say from my perspective how I have seen how schools and communities has put the pastors or the vicars, you know, on a high pedestal, right, as leaders of morality in society, I just don't think that is happening anymore. We don't really hear the church's voice anymore. So I don't think the prestige, I think so much has changed in society. So much has changed. I mean, when you disagree with people, you are seen as sometimes as I don't know what is the right word. People are getting so easily offended nowadays, right? If you disagree with them, right? Which was also not there 15, 20 years ago. I mean, so people might have, I want to hear what I think should be said and not what you know, what others are saying. And yeah, I think it has corroded the teaching profession, and maybe the greater society. Respect, I think, is another thing. Respect for one another, for teachers, learners, parents, vice versa. I think there's a lot that has been lost in many instances, and that has to be regained.
Let's imagine that André du Plessis is a minister of education in the Republic of South Africa. What would you do, let's say? Can you mention some?
I will not say what can I do, is because I will not use that approach. I would find out from the educational departments and the teachers themselves. We set up a proper research instrument to find out what are the needs. And we prioritize our system based on those needs. And then we get a plan of action to implement that. Because what is happening, there's a lot of talk, but the action I'm not seeing. Talk is cheap, right? We need action. So if I'm the minister, I will find out first to see whether what my perceptions are in line with what the communities, teachers, learners think needs to be done, right? And then my team and myself prioritizing, see where we can allocate the budget and the things to make these things a reality. And then also, obviously, I need to advertise as minister to my country, saying, we have now developed the following plan. This is phase 1 of the plan. This will be done by this. And there's a date and a timeline, and we need to stick with that, to that. This will be done by that, this by that. You can hold me accountable, right? This is the kind of leadership that we need, right? We need to say what we are going to do, by when, and then we must deliver. We cannot say that we are going to do these things and they're all in the sky. We need to see what the people want and help the people, because they are important. I cannot make those decisions myself. I think we need buy-in from the people. And when we get that, I think we might change the education system as a whole.
As I mentioned during my visit in Brazil last month, we also went outside the Recife. We saw some, let's say, provincial area. And we discussed also about education, and my idea was that education is really powerful, thing. It makes changes. We can make changes in society in general, etc. But it does not directly mean the positive one, the positive changes, because education can, yes, let's say, act in different, in opposite way. And we discussed obviously about nowadays situation, for example, in Europe, in Russia, and this aggression, Russian aggression related to Ukraine. And I'm not going into details, but I want to say that Russia started to change education system in general, to change a lot with different regulations for teachers, for parents, for students, and we can observe different negative actions. This is, let's say, my from one side the biggest concern, that education can act not only positively. What do you think in your opinion? Having in mind, obviously, South Africa, we mentioned the different challenges, different concerns in your country. For example, it's, let's say, relatively big country, more than 40 million inhabitants population.
Much more.
Much more. Yeah, much more. Also, you have resources, etc., etc. But education should produce changes, positive change.
Yeah, you see, I think if I understand you correctly, and if I link what you're saying now, is that when you make changes, it is sometimes painful and creating also negatives, because you have to go through that process to get to the positives. Okay, it's not just if you implement something immediately that it will yield positive results, right? Let's say, for example, you want to implement ICT into schools, and all schools, right? You might get a lot of resistance, okay? But in the end, if you plan it correctly and you give all the proper professional development to teachers, that negativity of the initial year 2 or 3 might yield a lot of positives. Okay, so any changes, not all changes are immediately having a positive outcome. And unfortunately, that is part of life. I mean, not every change is immediately relate to a positive. So, yeah, in South Africa, I think we will have to go through a number of painful changes. Things that a lot of teachers might not want to, but will have to, because that will be the only way that we are going to have positive outcomes in the long run. And I think for government to make some of these decisions are difficult, because that might also cause them to lose a lot of votes. So there's also a political dimension to all these aspects, so yeah, change.
It's not possible. It's not possible to avoid. This is policy of education, or policy in general. What is strategy?
Yeah. Well, policies are there, but many of the policies are not really implemented. To give you an example, in 2005-06, the draft white paper on ICT implementation in schools were gazetted. Okay, it is now 2022. I'm just checking my watch if I'm correct. 2022 as the time flies. Now, at 2011 or 2012, teachers should all have been trained to use ICT for teaching and learning and supplied with devices. It's 2022. Where is that? Right? Many teachers have received laptops, right? Many have not. Many have received data projectors, many not. Where are the tablets and the things that's going to be used? Now, recently, our government gazetted, and it's now being piloted, a coding. They call it coding. Coding, let's say, subject in the curriculum. Not coding and robotics and programming. So when I then started to look at this document, it became clear to me that coding has very limited space in this curriculum document, and that there's a much greater focus on computer literacy if you start looking at. So the coding is, for me, is not the right word, because this is not really coding. It's, if you look at it. Now my question is, is the government now going to implement this policy by giving all schools tablets or computers to actually do this? Where are they going to get the money from? Okay, and if they say they're going to do it, how many per school? All right. Is it not going to be that we are implementing something and the learners will have to do these things without devices, and what's happening? Learning is not happening. The teacher is standing maybe there in front of them and showing them something, but they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? So I think these are the things. We have lots of policies, but the policies are not really thought through and implemented, and sometimes it is implemented in a quick way with not good results. So policies are there, but I think the policies are not adhered to in most instances, and I think that is an issue that government should address.
And my possible last question, because time is running quite fast. A little bit maybe provocative question. Smart or competent teacher?
Smart or competent?
Yeah, smart or competent.
What do you mean by that?
I am asking you your understanding, because it's quite also interesting story. During if I remember well, during one symposium, IST symposium, one colleague from United States made a presentation, and she used the term smart teacher. And local British colleagues asked immediately, what do you mean by smart? Is it the same as competent or not?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm asking you.
Yeah, it was a deep discussion.
You probably asked that question to her.
It would be nice to, anyway to but doesn't matter, it can be without answer, we can give it as an open question.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't have an answer for you.
I can a little bit enlarge my understanding, because I think in every professions we have some accidental people. I am calling them accidental. For example, like accidental teacher. It means that, for example, it was no possibility or no any chance to become, let's say, a medical doctor or engineer or something else, and she or he decided to enter teacher education program at university or college, doesn't matter. I am naming them like accidental. And but every accidental teacher has a chance to become like a guru, like the best one. What do you think?
Okay. Yeah. Okay, I'll give you my take on how I see it. You get incompetent teachers, you get competent teachers, and you get highly competent teachers. Now, I would say the highly competent teacher is a smart teacher. If I have to, a smart teacher will include competency, right? But a very high level of competency in the sense that he or she knows what buttons to press to get his or her learners thinking at a higher level, to develop understanding in a more sensible way, for example, to use technology when he or she wants to use it in a competent way, and to know how to prepare the learner for the world outside there, right? So I would say that a highly competent teacher can also be maybe my definition of a smart teacher, right? It's not just competent. You competent means you can teach well, you can get the content over, and etc., etc. But the smart teacher makes you think more about just the content, can make you think deeper, can motivate you at a higher level, want to make you want to learn without force. I would say that is a smart teacher. Prepare you for the world out there. Have that also in mind. Thinking critically, allow your voice into the classroom. Allow different perspectives. Use different perspectives as points to invoke further discussions. That would be to me as a smart teacher. I'll be Googling that to see now.
Yeah, but how to prepare highly competent teacher, having not, let's say, not competent enough lecturers or teacher educators?
Yeah.
This is our question.
Well, in the end, I mean, I've tried now to unpack what I think a smart teacher is. Now, to develop them is another kettle of fish, because maybe not all students want to be smart teachers. That's the other thing. Okay, because I can give you everything, experience everything, and promote everything. It doesn't mean that you're going to want to be a smart teacher. And why I say this is, if we look at, and that's something that we haven't touched today on, but whenever policies are being made, whenever we talk about education, I think what happens in many instances, and I'm going to bring it back now, is the issue is that we don't look at theory, right? What to do when we implement something, for example. So let's say we want to implement and develop smart teachers. Now, there are other theories, but I'll just mention Rogers' innovational theory, which says, okay, so for a person to actually accept something new, and smart teacher being something new, all right, it needs to be, not to be complex, it needs to be simple, right? The other thing is it needs to be what do you call it, trialable. I need to be able to try it out to see whether it works for me, right? Then, does it have a relative advantage for me, right? Does it offer hope, relative advantage for me, my learners, whoever, okay? Then trialability, like I said, that can I try it out? So S, simplicity, T, triability, observability, can I see it in practice? Can people actually show me how it works, what it is, what it entails? Can they model it? And then also one thing is support, right? Support during and after. So, but with any innovation, a person has the right or the decision to make a decision. Either at the beginning, I'm not interested at this idea of, let's say, smart teachers at all. So I am, it doesn't matter what the lecturers or what they are saying, I want to continue like that. Then there are others that will buy into this idea, but at certain points, some of them might say, this is not for me, I'm going to jump off it. And there will be others that's going to continue, right, until the end, right? So there's this thing in innovation, and it's actually good because people have to make their own decisions. I sometimes think now, if you say smart teachers, now we want to make all teachers the same in inverted commas, right? Which is also not a good thing. Each person teacher should be unique. So any innovation in whether it's in teaching or in ideas, I think it's important to look at these things and to plan and cater for them, because if for example, simplicity, if it's going to be too complex, it's going to take me to prepare now 6 hours a day to be a smart teacher, but if I am just a competent teacher, it's going to take me 1 hour a day. Which one are you going to go? Okay. I mean, you're getting paid the same. So this might take, there's a lot of ideas coming from the US, right? And other countries, but it doesn't mean that it's necessarily good ideas. All new ideas are not good, and all historical ideas are not bad, and vice versa. So I don't just like to always just jump on something immediately. There are very good ideas, but do we have actually the teachers to carry them out? Do they have the time to do that?
Okay, thank you a lot, André, for this good position and interesting explanation. And our time is really approaching to end, and we're discussing around 2 hours already. And I sincerely thank you for this informative and multifaceted, I would say, conversation, which is undoubtedly mutually beneficial. And in addition, time you spend on this discussion is important and highly valued, because lack of time is our biggest enemy nowadays.
Absolutely,
and
but you're welcome.
Sharing knowledge, sharing experience, insights is meaningful in any case. And as researchers, both of us, we know very well that knowledge sharing benefits everyone at some extent in any case. And I wish you really big success in your academic, your personal life, your future career, and in general, in whole for South Africa, for South African people.
Yes.
And I hope that I will have a possibility to visit South Africa again in the near future, because my last visit was in 2020 at the end of February, just 1 week before pandemic started. COVID pandemic started, and then it was quite interesting and fruitful visit. And André, possible at the end you want to also to add something or to say some final words?
Thank you very much for this opportunity, Vincentas. It's really been great to talk to you. I hope I can visit Lithuania in the near future. I have some plans for visiting Slovenia and the UK by the end of this year, early next year. Maybe we can make a visit there to your country also. If I'm there, we can talk about that and foster some research opportunities together on a topic or two, so that we collaborate internationally. That will be great. Yes, I'm open for collaboration. Any colleagues listening to us, if it's ICT related, we can talk. As if it's about mentoring student teachers and their perceptions and experiences, I'm open for that. And thank you for the opportunity again, and all the best to everyone.
Yeah, thank you again, and have a nice day.
Thank you.